Welcome to JCAT, a program that seeks to introduce Japanese, contextualized literature and ideas for use by missionaries and anyone that seeks to share the gospel with Japanese people.
日本人から聞く日本のキリスト教。
All right, welcome back, everyone. I'm here with my friend Billy. Billy, I just want to apologize in advance that I might just keep going over the same jokes that I already say to you because they're, in my mind, Billy jokes. So you've probably already heard them. In my mind, I still call you Andy all the time because of the 90s, 2000s era Yankees pitcher, Andy Pettit.
Okay.
Is it Pettit? Is that how you pronounce it?
It's actually petite.
Petite.
Petite. Yeah.
I saw your name on the Zoom.
Mhm.
Petito.
Oh
But
yeah.
I'm probably
You're right. Switching.
overemphasizing the last one there. So yeah, Billy is a as you may guess, Billy Petite is a guy of Western descent. I don't know if you're American or Canadian.
American.
American. An American guy who is a pastor, not a missionary, we would say, probably, but he's an American Japanese pastor in Akita Prefecture. So that's pretty unique, and I wanted to just hear some of Billy's what brought Billy to this point, and how it's going. So Billy, okay, can you give us just a sort of a little background, brief bio sketch, stuff like that?
Okay, no problem. I was actually born in Chattanooga, Tennessee. My father was going to seminary at the time at Tennessee Temple University, and then they went on deputation, went all over America, different churches. So I ended up in Japan when I was 7 years old, and first 2 years in Japan were in Karuizawa, which there was a language school there, so my dad could learn Japanese. My mom was born in Kyoto and grew up in Kagoshima because my grandpa was also a missionary from 1955. So she knew Japanese, my dad didn't. So we first had to learn Japanese for 2 years in Karuizawa, and then we moved to Kagoshima, which is the southern tip of Japan. And I lived there from when I was 9 years old till 17 years old, when I went to Ohio to Cedarville University. And it's there in Cedarville University that I met my wife, and she was from Akita, Japan, way in northern Japan. And we ended up getting married while I was in college, and I ended up coming to her home church that she was saved and baptized in Akita in 2010. So, no, I guess 2011. So I ended up coming to Akita in 2011, and I've been pastoring at the church here called Akita Bible Baptist Church since 2011, about 14, 15 years now.
Wow.
It's a brief sketch.
Yeah, that's cool. So, here's a funny story. I asked Billy to come on the podcast because what had been in my mind lately was missionary kids education. And there was a misunderstanding about a story that I won't go too into, just a little bit. The story that led me to believe that Billy went through Japanese school his entire life. And part of why I believe that is because when I would go to our denominational pastor missionary Sokai annual meeting, or I think the teamwork meeting, is that Sokai also, Billy?
It follows the Sokai, but it's a part of it, yeah.
Okay, so Sokai's it's like day one of our pastor missionary meeting, I usually come kind of towards the end of that because we drive up from Kanto to Iwate. And often when all the Japanese pastors are giving their reports on different things, the Sokai reports that I usually kind of pretend like I'm listening to, they call up Billy Sensei and then they make him give the financial reports, which is like the hardest ones to give linguistically, both because of the language and then the numbers. Like once you start getting into like 1,000 man and stuff like that, I mean, I guess maybe that's a million. I don't know. But I just can't keep track in my mind. So the fluency necessary to give any kind of report at Sokai and B, the financial report is overwhelming to me. So when I was talking to Billy one time about his experience in Kagoshima or about someone else's experience in Kagoshima, I had a language professor who was a lady that said that when she was in high school in Kagoshima, people took their motorcycles to school and then she and the other girls would sit on the back of their boyfriends' motorcycles. And they'd go up and down the hills to school on their motorcycles. And then Billy made a comment about something similar to his experience, which led me to believe, oh, so that's why you're so good at Japanese. You went to Japanese school the whole time. So I was like, I'd better ask Billy because so many missionaries are wondering what to do with their kids, right? So a lot of missionaries end up close to CAJ, where my oldest son goes to school, because we want to make sure that our kids have adequate education, English language education. And I was like, well, shoot, if Billy could make it all the way through Japanese school, so much that he's doing the financial reports at Sokai in the Japanese Pastors Association, then maybe that's something to talk about. Then I asked Billy, and he's like, no, I never went to Japanese school. So I'm kind of back to square one with this whole interview. But I thought, it must have been a wild ride for Billy, who is a missionary kid and now a Japanese pastor. So I guess we just spoke a bit off before I hit record, but let's pick it up where you were saying the first Japanese word you learned was irete, and maybe just explain kind of how you started learning Japanese.
Okay. So I never went to Japanese school, and there were no other foreigners in our area in Kagoshima. The closest American kids that spoke English were about 2 hours away by car. So if I wanted to make any friends, I needed to learn Japanese really quick. So the first word I learned was irete, which is like, can I play with you type of thing. And I'd go to like parks where they were playing baseball or whatnot and say irete. And that was all I could say. And then I'd start playing with them and slowly started picking up Japanese. And when I started picking up Japanese, I was 9 years old. Until that point, I had enough. There were English speakers that I could interact with that didn't really need Japanese. But from 9 years old, it just got cut off completely. So if I wanted any friends, I would need to learn Japanese and learn it quick. And just personality wise, I love friends. Like if I have any problem with idolatry, it's obviously my friends, at least at that point, were my idols. So it's sort of like my sacrifice to my idols at that time was I needed to learn Japanese as fast as possible and as good as possible to get lots of friends and maintain those friendships. And so I guess looking back, the reason why I probably got good at Japanese quickly is because I loved friends and I wanted friends, but I couldn't do that without Japanese. So that was something I needed to get and quickly.
That's interesting. Yeah, I also love people and love hanging out with people and talking to people. So we mentioned you were homeschooled throughout. I was homeschooled much of my life, and it wasn't my favorite thing to do because I wanted more regular interaction. Even though I was homeschooled in California, where I had plenty of homeschool friends, but I wanted as much hours and hours of daily interaction as I could get, and just I think it's just a people person thing. So okay. Then if you didn't go to Japanese school, were you involved in like Naraigoto, or because I feel like the older you get, if you're not involved in something, like especially chugako onward, you might have a difficult time maintaining friendships as a kid in Japan. Were you involved in, how did you maintain, either maintain friendships, or if you didn't maintain friendships, maintain your Japanese through those like chugako, koko, or even later elementary years?
Mhm. Well, to give a little overview of my schooling situation, first grade in elementary school, we didn't have any place to live, so we just were in the car all the time. So school was in the car. They would give me like a book, and while we were driving, I would be writing. And when we got to the church, I would be doing school. And
That's
that
during deputation.
yeah, it was during so
Okay.
first grade. It was during deputation, always in the car. And then we came to Japan, Karuizawa, and there's a language school there. So they had a school for the kids of the parents who were learning Japanese. So there were about eight students from mostly America. So it was all in English, and there were friends and about eight students. But ended up leaving that when I was going into second, third, fourth grade, and going to Kagoshima. And in Kagoshima, I did 1 year of typical homeschooling where I would stay at home. And then one other missionary family was there that first year. So they would send their kids to my house. So they were all together, me, my sister, and two other kids at my house, and my mom would teach us. So that was 1 year, fourth grade. But that didn't really work out for the family. And my mom spoke perfect Japanese while my dad didn't speak as much Japanese. So they really needed my mom's interpretation to help as much as possible. So they decided that probably wouldn't work too well. So what they did is they put out a call to all of America saying, we need a missionary teacher for our kids. And one person responded to that, and she raised support, I guess, and came over when I got into fifth grade. And that one teacher became a missionary just to teach me and my sister. There were no other people that needed or wanted it, but she came. I think she was in her 20s at the time. And she came when I was in fifth grade. She taught me fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade. Eighth grade was furlough. So I went to a school, Christian school in Ohio. But then ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th, all this one teacher. We would go to her house. We would ride our bikes to her house about 15, 20 minutes. And there was a room in her house that we would have school in, and she would teach us every single day. So that was my situation from fifth grade pretty much all the way to senior in high school. And regarding naraigotos, like learning different things, I could tell my parents would try sometimes, but the way they try is it wasn't really what I wanted. It was more what they thought would be good, especially for like example basketball. Because I'm tall, I'm 197 centimeters. So they thought maybe I could get a scholarship if I worked at basketball. So they stuck me into this. I think it was more like an adult team type of thing, saying here you learn Japanese, and they asked the people at that team, say our son is really tall, please teach him basketball. And I went there for maybe a few months, but I didn't like basketball at all. I liked soccer, and I wasn't interested in also at all. So that sort of ended, and they I wouldn't say forced, but I guess it was forced. They forced swimming on me, and the one thing I am grateful for is they did think that it would be very good if I got my Japanese language proficiency test.
Hmm.
So they put me for a few months in a school that would train you to learn all the kanji needed for the Japanese language proficiency test level 1.
Oh,
And
one.
I got that when I was a senior, and I didn't understand why I was getting it at the time, but now it is nice to sort of have proof that I do know some Japanese.
Yeah.
It's nice. But that was about it. A little bit of swimming in my elementary school years, maybe 6 months of basketball in high school, and then a little bit of language, Japanese kanji type of stuff. But that's all. So if I wanted to interact with friends, the only time I could ever interact with friends, for the most part, obviously there were exceptions, but for the most part was Sundays. Sundays when I go to church, there are a few other young people there. So for me, my whole life just revolved around Sunday. I would count down the hours, the days. I finally get Sunday and get to meet some people of my own age. And of course, sometimes we could meet on Saturday and stuff, but they had their own bukatsus and different things that they were doing. So they were quite busy. And Sunday would be the only day that I could meet them. So obviously that made it so that I loved church, but not for the right reason. It was all because my idols were there, and my what I loved the most about life itself was at church, and I'd only get to meet them once a week. So I was extremely lonely for most of my childhood just because of that. And that was difficult, but obviously God works all things together for good. So it really pushed me to realize that ultimately I needed him. And I just remember so well this one time in the middle of the street in Kagoshima, I was walking. It was during normal Japanese school time, so I was alone. I just remember just yelling out "Oto-san" real loud at that street, and I just felt his presence in a way I had never felt before, and that sort of kicked off something that really made me realize that it's not about friends. Friends will come and go, and relationships will come and go, but the relationship with Christ will not. So, yes, it all worked out, and it always does. But I was very lonely, and that was the hardest part about my childhood or schooling situation, I would say, probably.
Yeah. Wow. That's that's rough. Um, but like you said, yeah, it's good to see God using that. It kind of makes me think of, like a shoot, there was a cool word for that. The the monks in the caves in like 1800 years ago.
Yeah.
I feel like there was a cool word for those people, but I forget it right now. Um, but yeah, the I guess there are ways to remove distractions and see God, um, voluntary or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so then fast forward and you are now in Okta and you've been pastoring for 14. Okay, because I don't always pay attention as well as I should. You said that you met your wife at college
Yep.
in the States,
Yep.
and she was from Okta.
Yep.
So she's part of the church group that you and I are both loosely affiliated,
Yes.
or you're not loosely affiliated with. I'm
Yeah.
working at one of the church
Yep. Yep. Yep.
plants. Okay. So and then so now and you have one child.
Yep.
And you don't consider yourself a missionary specifically.
No.
That's my other good Billy story. So we're gonna put this in the category of like myths because I don't know how true any of this is, but you don't have to confirm or deny because then it would take the magic out of it. But somebody, I think it was Dawn, but I could be wrong,
Mhm.
put together Don Berkner, your good friend and mine, Don Berkner. Let the listener know Don Berkner is a lovely woman who works up north. Um, she may or may not have put this together. Uh, but the list of missionaries per prefecture. And on that list, Akita was listed as having one missionary. My brother told me because my brother sees you a little more often than I do. And he said that you and he were talking and you were excited that there's a missionary in Akita and you were like, where is this guy? I'm in Akita. I've been in Akita for a long time. I really want to meet this guy. I think it'd be cool to maybe, work with this guy, but I can't find him. And my brother's like, Billy, I think they mean you. And so maybe somebody just knew that you were there and assumed that you're a missionary because you're from Tennessee, did you say?
Yeah. Born in Tennessee.
Yeah, yeah. And you don't look like a Japanese pastor.
No.
But maybe that was the story and I don't know again if that's really how it went. But point being that you think of yourself and you are by all legal accounting and everything, right? your employer would be the church, not like a mission agency or something.
Yes.
Uh, and I feel like you wrote an article or something a few years back challenging. Was it in the Japan Harvest or where was that? Or was it just an online thing? Sort of talking about a challenge to be a Japanese pastor as opposed to being that kind of more outsider role that missionaries often take. Am I onto
Mm,
something or am I making up something?
I think you're making up something.
Shoot. All right. I mean, I do that sometimes. That's why I always got to kind of fact check myself. Okay. Um, but you being a Japanese pastor,
Yep.
um, and your kids, so what is your home language? Do you guys have is it purely Japanese or
Unfortunately, it's almost all Japanese. So
uh
our son hardly speaks any English at all.
uh
So that's slightly unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Yeah, and he goes to just Japanese school, huh?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I don't know. I'm not familiar with the international school situation in Akita, but I would be surprised if there was a
Yeah,
vibrant international school for
there's no
children.
international schools in Akita right now. They're trying to build one. They have been trying to make one for many years, but even if they made one, it's way more expensive than we could
Oh yeah.
afford. So, man, it's very intentional that we're putting him in Japanese school because it's perhaps it's selfish, but we view Japan as having a bigger need than most English speaking nations. So if we want, of course, we don't know God's plan or anything like that, but our hope is that he stays in Japan and the church in Japan needs as many people as possible. And we hope that he can serve the church in Japan. And for that, he doesn't really need English. And I know it's very selfish, but having English makes it even more likely that he'll leave Japan, even though from our viewpoint, Japan needs what he is or what he hopefully, Lord willing, will be
Sure.
much more than anywhere else. And having him in Japanese school gives us a lot more context than we would have had with non-believers. And we really value those contacts. I mean, he's also on the J League soccer team. So he travels all across Japan,
Oh wow.
Hokkaido, Tokyo, Osaka, all over doing different big tournaments and stuff. So we have so much interaction with our community and non-believers because he is in Japanese school and because he is very involved with soccer and things like that. And that was intentional. But for me, it's extremely hard because I want more control. And I'm so envious of my parents because they had complete control of what I was taught and everything, the single thing about my schooling situation. And that would just be so nice. But I don't have that control. And so I'm very mixed in my feelings regarding it because a part of me makes me realize that because of that, I have to trust God more than I would if I had total control of everything that He was learned, taught, everything. But so that trust in God is something that I struggle with daily because I want to just control everything that He hears and sees and is taught, and I want to control His future. I want to control everything about Him, but is that really best? It would be easier for me, and I would love to do that. But kingdom wise, I don't know if I can easily say that is the best. And I don't know. And so it's like a big, in a way, it's like a big experiment. And I shouldn't be experimenting with my son really, but I want him to impact Japan because Japan needs that impact. So my goal at home is to, of course, teach him the Bible and Christ as much as possible and send him out. And hopefully, eventually, he will do so willingly and desiring to do. Right now, that's not the case, but that's my desire. And that's why we chose Japanese school instead of any other situation. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Y-
going back to the Japanese pastor situation, there's probably two big reasons that I chose that path. Well, maybe three. If you count my marriage to a Japanese citizen, that just made it visa-wise a lot easier to do. I guess you could call that one reason. But probably the primary reason is growing up as a missionary kid, and especially as church planting missionary kid. always seeing my parents, the goal of their life was to leave the church that they were at. Like from day one, they wouldn't say it, but I knew it and I could see it that their goal was to leave that church. And that just was miserable for me because that's the people you love, that's the people you serve. And my goal every single day I go to church is to say goodbye. And oh, that was just horrible. And I thought, of course, there's all different types of missionaries, but at the very least, church planting missionaries, the idea of that was just, ugh, it's miserable, disgusting to me. Even though I think it's necessary and I'm very thankful for church planting missionaries, I did not want to do that. So the Japanese, pastoring at a Japanese church sounded like a good idea. And then the other one was just seeing how many churches in Japan didn't have pastors and seeing that situation growing and growing, and also talking to so many young Japanese men that were not interested at all in being a pastor just because the pay is low and it's a miserable job. You're always being complained at. It's just everything's bad about it. So I thought I could first fill one church that needed a pastor. That ended up being the church in Akita. And in so doing, my desire or hope was that I could do it joyfully and do it publicly in a way that young Japanese men would look at that and say, if he can have this much fun pastoring, then maybe it's not as bad as I thought it was. And sort of impact young Japanese men by pastoring in a joyful, fun way. And in so doing, increase the number of Japanese pastors, because I don't think my situation is ideal at all. I think Japanese churches should be pastored by Japanese people. But just right now, the situation in Japan is such that there aren't nearly enough such people. The church that I'm at right now was without a pastor for 17 years, and that's pretty normal. There's many churches just an hour away. There's a church that hasn't had a pastor for over 20 years. That's so just normal in Japan. But I don't think it should be normal, and I understand all the difficulties and reasons for that. But I want to play whatever small role that is in supporting churches that don't have pastors. Instead of starting a new church, I want that church to thrive and re-energize, and I want to play my role in doing so. Whether I've been able to do that or not is questionable, but that was my desire when I started, and it still is my desire right now. Yep.
That's awesome. I think that I mean, I've been going to these meetings again. We tend to see each other about once a year for maybe the past 4 or 5 years, and then we hang out with the same Japanese pastor group. You more than I do. Again, I primarily work on a church plant in the group that's geographically a little further away from most of the other churches.
Mhm.
But to me, I think that the way that you're serving is more of an encouragement to the other Japanese pastors in the group. I mean, maybe it's not fair to say more, but I think it's fair to say more. So whatever. I think it's more encouraging to the other Japanese pastors in the group than the way a typical missionary operates, kind of outside of the Japanese pastor community. What you said there about your parents' ideas to plant a church that they would leave, essentially turn over to local leadership, reminded me of something because I got my degree in biblical studies with an emphasis in missions. So I came into missionary work, uh, you know, close to 20 years ago now, with the ideas that I learned in Bible college about missions, right? So you want to, as much as possible, church plant, and you want to you want to work yourself out of a job.
Mhm.
I think that's all conventional wisdom. And what I feel like where I've come to by working in Japan for as long as I have, is that so much conventional missiological wisdom is just not super applicable here. That's my thought. Again, like in theory, all of that is fine and good, but in practice in Japan, it really needs to be rethought because you and I could work our entire careers right into retirement, and Japan probably won't, in a best case scenario, we won't have worked ourselves out of a job. You know what I mean? Like just the realities of it. There's not, like you said, I mean, and the situation is by all accounts worsening. We're losing more pastors to retirement, even though what is it? The average age of a pastor is close to the retirement age anyway. I mean, because so many pastors are working into their retirement years.
Hmm.
It's concerning the data suggesting how many more pastorless churches will, you know, be the reality a decade from now. So, yeah, I think that's really cool that that's the way that you've chosen to do things. And I also think that um for the guys that we both work with, again, you more than I think that's super encouraging to them. And I think they would love to see more of that. Um I guess the big barrier for most missionaries to work the way that you do is um language, both written and spoken, but also just the idea that a missionary so often really holds that outsider identity. Like if I'm a missionary, I can go back to California every 4 years and be the expert on something, right? But if I'm a an immigrant in Japan, or if I'm just a foreign worker in Japan, I'm basically not the expert on anything. I'm putting all of my efforts into something where I'll generally not be considered competent. I think that's what's so interesting about you is because you know, I think everybody rightfully treats you as a competent at what you're doing. Um, because and that's flattery, so you don't have to like respond to it. But I mean, like, yeah, most missionaries won't probably get to that level, but how can we get closer to that level? You mentioned that when you were a kid, probably offline, you mentioned that when you were a kid, your parents intentionally um avoided American influences to focus on Japan. So like sports and news and I guess cartoons and things like that. Do you want to, I don't know, how, so your own child is being raised pretty much just as a Japanese kid. What would you think, would be, this is probably a difficult question for you because balancing your own, um, struggles and then some of the things that you found effective in your own family. Is there any thoughts or wisdom you could give to missionaries on the best ways to balance, but also to maybe go deeper, find themselves deeper in Japanese culture and society and networks and things? What would you say to that?
Probably looking back as a child, looking at my family, and then looking at other missionary families. Like every once a year, I was associated with a group called Association of Baptists for World Evangelism, and so once a year they'd have like a missionary meeting. So at least once a year I would meet other missionaries and the families. They were from different areas, but I would meet them and I'd meet the kids as well. And the big difference that I felt, I don't know how intentional it was with my parents. I'm sure it's because my grandpa was also a missionary from 1955. So they sort of had this, Japan was our life. Japan was everything. The church in Japan, the kingdom in Japan. And so we had no, or I felt that my parents had no problem just totally cutting off ties with America in every way. Like I don't know if it was good or bad or whatnot, but that is what I felt. They were just cutting it off so that I would focus, me and my sister would focus more on Japan, because Japan, at least number wise and statistically, needs people more than America. So to make us more focused on Japan, and they wanted to give us options. That's why they made us go to English type of school. But their prayer and their desire is that we would stay in Japan. And then my sister and I are both staying in Japan and serving the church in Japan. We both marry Japanese people. And I don't know how intentional that was, but it was very clear that your life is more needed in Japan than in America. And of course, God is in control. Wherever you go, they were fine with that. They would say that. But their desire that I could feel and see and how they talked and how they acted, everything was that this is the nation that our family is going to give everything to, whether it be our money, our time, our everything. So when I first came to Akita, it was a weird situation because the conservative Baptists at that time didn't have someone like me. So they were like, how do we deal with this person? And I remember at one big meeting, I introduced myself and I said, my plan is to die in Akita, serve the church in Akita until I die. Don't know how long that'll be, but I plan on dying here. And everyone laughed. And I was like, why are you laughing? It's just, that was sort of the mentality toward foreigners, was such an idea, was sort of, at least how I interpreted it, was foreign to them. But that was my desire, that my life is for Japan. Of course, it's for God, it's for his kingdom, but I felt, and I still do feel, that everything that I do say, everything is for, not for America, not for anywhere else, but the church in Japan. And so to do that, I need to speak Japanese very well. I need to understand the culture very well. And honestly, I don't really need America. I don't need their culture, their politics, their English. I wouldn't care if I lost it really. And it's a useful tool, but my goal is Japan, Japanese people. And so I don't know. Everyone's situation is different, and of course, you have probably have lots of family in America that you need to stay connected to. I understand all that, but my family's view from my grandpa's age, from 1955, and my parents and me as well, is just Japan needs us. So why not give everything to this nation? And that's why my son is in Japanese school, and if he goes to American college, of course he can, but I would I would be more happy if he went to a
richer.
Japanese university. And I won't say that to him. He can do whatever he wants. He doesn't need, I don't care what he does. But personally, just as an individual, I hope he doesn't see this someday, but I hope he stays in Japan and serves some local church. It doesn't need to be big or special or anything, but I hope he serves a local church in Japan with everything that he has someday. And to do so, understanding Japanese culture, language, schooling, everything will be a better tool to reach Japanese, because he will be able to say, yeah, in elementary school, I did this or that, just like you. And that sort of connection easily reaches out to people with the gospel in ways that people with my face and my background, I guess I'm not a normal American, but normal Americans can't sometimes. So it's so complicated, because with like Americans can reach Japanese in a way that Liam, my son, won't be able to. And so I understand the benefits of that. And I'm not saying it's what I'm saying is always the answer, but that's just the way I think. I think I want to give everything to Japan, the church in Japan, the kingdom in Japan. And that's the way I think.
Well, I think that's a great challenge, because maybe even if we can't all get to that level, I think that we can all get further. We can all go deeper. And I think we can all be challenged by the idea that we can, in order to go deeper, we all probably can let go of some things that sort of that are holding us culturally to our, culture one, and holding us away from this place that God's called us to. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your honesty and your perspective, and look forward to joining forces next April, May, and finally winning a softball game against the Japanese
No,
pastor team. Well, or I shouldn't even say that because you're a Japanese pastor, but you get to play for the American team that loses every year. So, but we can blame the Canadians maybe.
exactly. It's to make the Japanese pastors look good, I'm sure.
I feel like that's a social social. It's a strategy.
It is,
We
it
let
is.
them win
Exactly.
to
Exactly.
make the
Encourage
friendships.
them.
Yeah. Right. I'm
Encourage.
encouraging Japanese pastors
Exactly. Very important. They need it.
when I play softball and lose. The sacrifices we make.
Exactly.
Well, thanks again. And uh I'm yes, I'm probably just going
Thank
to
you.
edit that little spot where I was trying to find the stop recording button.
Okay.